Kiwi, 11 minutes past 9 now.
Live from the New Scientist Labs, it's Janine Young with Wammo on Kiwi.
It's from Melbourne City. It is Janine Young with us this morning. Hello to you, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
Good morning to you. Now, first up, this is quite an exciting story. A man who can see into the future.
It's not quite the way it sounds. It's actually a man called Bueno. Hang on, I've got to make sure I get his name right. It is Bruce Bueno de Mesquita. And it sounds very bad when I get that wrong. I don't speak Spanish. I apologise to everyone who does.
Nor do I.
He's at the University of New York, and he has developed a theory that he runs through a computer that is able to make predictions about what's going to happen in situations such as, domestic politics, or it could be, decisions associated with anything that requires complex kinds of decisions. But unfortunately, he cannot predict the lottery. I think that's the thing that we're most disappointed about.
Yeah, exactly. What, everything but?
Well, he's taking very serious questions, there's no doubt about, such as, will Iran build a warhead? I think they're the kind of things you're interested in. Which person is going to become Indian Prime Minister when this government collapses? That question was asked back in 1979, and everyone else was picking one particular guy because that appeared to be what was going to happen. His computer model, on the other hand, takes into account what the question is, makes a basic assumption, and that assumption can be the killer to some of his theories and some of his answers. Who's involved? How much influence they have? Are they likely to coerce other people towards an opinion? Are they likely to negotiate? How much do they want this kind of settlement to come through, given the assumption in the first place? It takes into account how people are likely to behave. This is based on something called game theory, which is trying to work out a solution according to what other people are going to do and how they depend on other people. So, for example, you could take you and I, if we're in a negotiation, you may really, really want an outcome pertinent to the next story, say to make sure that Mediterranean bluefin tuna are no longer being fished. I may be a fisher person, which means that I don't really want that to happen because that's my livelihood. So you come to me and you say, okay, here's my thing, here's what I want. And I can say, yes, no, maybe. I can respond with a positive, I can come back with a negative, I can bully you, I can even try and blackmail you if I had something on it. So it's taking all these sorts of things into account, because humans aren't always truthful and cooperative, and that's what original game theory was based on. But this one isn't. It plugs all these sorts of factors into a computer model and pops out the other end with an answer. And he's claiming, and the CIA analysis is claiming, that he's over 90% accurate.
Wow. So what about specifically with the issue of a warhead in Iran? I mean, did he actually come up with an answer there?
They didn't actually tell us what the answer would be. He was looking at the factors and the like. So no, he hasn't actually published his answer. But some of the criticisms around this are that they're not definitive and they require interpretation. It pops out a number at the other end. For example, if your scale's 200 and it pops out with 120, what does that mean? Does it mean we have a warhead, or does it mean that we don't? He comes back by saying, well, it actually means that we will have weapons-grade fuel, but we won't have a warhead.
Right.
So he claims there's actually quite a bit of subtlety in between, but others don't see it quite that clearly. Someone else is saying that this particular Bueno de Mesquita, to say that properly, is actually a very good political scientist. So his inputs, which are crucial for this, because if you put rubbish in and you'll get rubbish out, his inputs are better than most because he considers things in ways that a lot of other people don't, and has access to other people that will give him really quality information. So there's debate as to how much the model actually matters, but he claims that he's actually building another model now that's even more sensitive, takes perhaps incomplete or imperfect data into account. It takes more things into the theory to be able to make it better. And he's claiming that the accuracy on those is even better. So we might be able to get predictions on what's going to happen in the Middle East, for example. Yeah,
interesting. Well, that's very interesting. Now let's go to another hot topic, and it's one that we have kind of been covering over the past few months. That is what's happening in our oceans, particularly with fish stocks. And there's been another study that's come out that that examines the relationship between cookbooks and fish stocks.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that this one would have a great deal to do with it. However, there's a group that's looked at a number of cookbooks, 122 years worth, for example, more than 3,000 recipes, looking at the types of fish that are included in it. And they have a thing called a trophic index. It's kind of like a trophy. That's what it's based on. Yep. How prestigious and how special that particular species is. And they've found over time that this index has gone from about 2.9 up to 3.4. Apparently, even a 0.15 increase in this trophic index is enough to start affecting ecosystems. So it means over time, fish, or big predatory fish such as tuna, are now popping into cookbooks a lot more. And you would think that as their stocks decrease, that we'd actually be going for smaller fish that are more plentiful. We're not. We're actually finding that people are going towards more tuna because it's becoming rarer and therefore more prestigious, more status-driven. And we've talked about bluefin tuna stocks before. November last year, we talked about the fact that they're in CITES. I can't remember the acronym for it. It's an international, an animal organisation associated with the UN that talks about whether they can be hunted or whether they can't. And that meeting is actually later on this month. Monaco is trying to ban Mediterranean bluefish tuna hunting. And it's one of the smallest countries in the world that's trying to say to the rest of the planet, look, this can't go on. We'll find out what the outcome of that is. But in trying to put these into cookbooks, it actually is an aspirational kind of thing. It doesn't tell us what we're cooking, it tells us what we'd like to cook. So it's shifted over the last 100 or so years. And we're finding that these predatory fish, these big species that are, very rare now because they're being hunted into what you might call extinction, they're popping up in our cookbooks even more because they're really prestigious.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a bind, really.
And I just wonder whether or not those cues for what pops up in cookbooks actually come from high fashion, really sought after restaurants and cooks, whether or not the cue actually comes from them initially and then it filters down through to the cookbooks and then to the end consumer.
Oh, certainly, absolutely. I think even 50 years ago, high status and luxury items were not as readily available for the ordinary person as they are now. And I think you'll agree they're everywhere now. The fact that you can pop into Louis Vuitton if you want to and spend $400 on a handbag. In fact, that's probably a little less than it's. I don't shop, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact that most people, if they wanted to, could step into a shop like that, and if they had the money, they could spend it and they could get it. It didn't used to be that way. So I think it's fairly similar with food. So I think you're probably right.
Well, yeah, so partially the key maybe to helping the fish stocks and helping recovery of some of these fish is to make the changes at the restaurants initially.
Changing demand would certainly make a huge difference to this. I think people if they've gotten used to eating tuna though, how happy are they going to be to not be eating tuna now? You've got the demand side as well as the supply, as well as the influences in between. And you're absolutely right. You can't ignore those influences because they have a great deal of power.
Well, I think very soon people aren't going to have a choice. The fish just won't be there.
Well, yeah, that'll increase its status even more, won't it?
Yeah.
Because in Japan, you can get fantastic amounts of money for even relatively small tuna. And, of course, the smaller they are, it means the less time they've had to breed and the like. So it's a circle that just keeps getting worse and worse. I think they call it a vicious circle. So
a downward spiral, Janine.
Well, the Mediterranean tuna in particular is on the brink of extinction. So they're taking 3 times as many fish as the stock can maintain. So it's a question of time, unfortunately.
Yep, and I think it's important that we keep on talking about it.
Absolutely, and as often as you want me to, I'll be here.
Thanks, Janine. Janine Young, our New Scientist correspondent, and those stories you'll find in New Scientist magazine coming out next week.